Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's construction clinic hosted by the ICCP. My name is Nina Hewitt, I'm the General Manager, and before we get started on today's questions, we're going to take you through a short introduction. I'll introduce today's panelists and then we'll get straight to it. So nice to see a lot of familiar names on the session today. Also nice to see some members and our regional representatives, so welcome to everybody. Most people are familiar with the ICCP now. We've been running these clinics since COVID started. I think this is session 17. So we're not going to dwell too much on what the ICCP is and what it does. We hope by now you know that. We are just going to touch very briefly on membership. So we offer 3 levels of membership at associate, member and fellow. Each come with a defined set of criteria which must be met in order to gain entry at that level. Associate is for our entry claims practitioners. These would be professionals perhaps at the start of their career who are really getting to grips with claims and really need to focus on education and knowledge. And we encourage them to do that through the ICCP's knowledge base, training courses and CPD webinars similar to this one. Then we encourage upgrading to full member once you've attained the right qualifications and expertise. And at the other end of the spectrum, we have fellow reserved for those who are substantially experienced in claims management and have racked up those years of expertise. All of the criteria and the details are on the website, and we'll share the link with you shortly. Now, one thing we are going to bring your attention to today, our marketing team has been quite busy, and we've recently put together a video, and the beauty of our new singing and dancing webinar software is that we can play this for you. So here's 8 reasons to join the ICCP if you've thought about doing so. Okay, so I hope you found that interesting. Very short, very brief. You will find a benefits page on the ICCP website, which goes into more detail and covers some of the softer benefits, if you like. So I'll send that link through the chat box when we get to questions. Okay, so there's the website link. My email address is also on screen there. If you have any questions or would like more information, please always feel free to drop me a line. I'm happy to have a chat over email or to give you a call. Okay, so today's panelists, you'll all be familiar with Andy and Lee by now. They've co-hosted many of these clinics so far. Andy is our executive officer. He's a fidic contracts and claims expert. He's the author of a couple of well-known industry books, Construction Claims and Responses and the Fidic Contracts. He has also just released a new book which deals with Fidic 1999 notices. The book offers a guide to the requirements, content and composition of notices under the red, yellow and silver books. So if you ever have to submit notices, which I think most of you will, I suggest you have a look. Then we have Lee Spall. He's a planning and delay analysis expert. He's also one of our fellows and steering committee member. So Lee's going to kick things off for us today, and I'm now going to hand over to Lee to get started with his questions.
Hi everyone. Thanks for the introduction, Nina. It's the first time I've seen that video. Very good. Right, well, thank you all for joining this afternoon. I've got just 2 questions, so I'll be on briefly and then Andy will take over. The question I've got, first one, is from Ronnie Casono. And his question is, can the employer issue a negative extension of time in the event that he issue an instruction to omit substantial part of the works? Simple answer, no. You can't issue a negative extension of time. Once an extension of time is awarded, that's it, it's awarded. The contract date has been amended, revised due to that extension of time. It can't then be removed. This is why most clients are reluctant to issue you an extension of time during your project, because they're fearful of you don't actually need that time. Also, they don't want to give you any extension of time. So the answer is no, you can't have a negative. If he was to remove the scope of work from you, a section of work, depends where that section of work is, but again, it's a no in terms of reducing the contract period. You've signed up for it, the prelims are all signed up for it. I'm sure Andy might pick up on this point contractually. So that's it, it's a no. The second question, a little bit more complex, and that is, if the contract completion date has already been lapsed, does this mean any delays caused by the employer shall entitle the contractor to an extension of time? Does this mean that no more critical path to speak of? The last point, no more critical path. Wrong. There's always a critical path to complete the works. The contract date has passed. There's no new extension of time date given. There is now a forecast completion date of the works, and there is a critical path to complete that date. So there is always a critical path or longest path to achieve the completion of the works, regardless of what extension of time you've been given or not. For instance, if you weren't given an extension of time because the delay was yours and the client has not revised the contract date, the contract's now passed, you've still got a longest path for your best efforts to complete the works. If the client then delays you, does that affect your completion date? You've already delayed the completion date. There's no extension of time. You get an instruction from the client. That doesn't entitle you to an extension of time unless it delays that completion date further than what you're already going to complete. You may try and argue concurrency in that, but again, it's a huge, you're already the dominant delay for the completion. And the concurrency, is, you know, is a very complex situation to talk about just in 5 minutes. So there's always a critical path. It doesn't mean you get an extension of time if he awards you, gives you an instruction or delays the works, doesn't guarantee you a further extension of time. So no. Just make sure completion date is already been matched. Does this mean delays called valuable? Yes, it doesn't mean that there's definitely that there's an extension of time because he delays it past the completion date. He can issue 100 instructions past the completion date, which don't affect you finishing the works. They provide you additional work, which you then manpower, bring on the materials, and you complete that work still within the same period that you were going to delay the job to. So no, there is no additional extension of time. It's not always going to be an extension time based on him giving you an instruction. You have to demonstrate it, and therefore there is always a critical path and a longest path. I hope that answers it for you, Ronnie, but again, as always, if you're not clear, get in touch with Nina, and we'll see what we can do to clarify it clearer for you. That's all from me at the moment, unless we get some other questions in later on through this seminar. But I'm going to pass you over to Andy, who will take you on with the next few questions. Over to you, Andy.
Thanks very much, Lee. Sorry, this is new software for me. I think I'm on screen now.
You're right.
Lee, if you don't mind, if I could just add to what you answered for Ronnie in the first question, it's just interpretation of the question. I think where Lee was coming from is that if the contractor's been given an extension of time, and then the employer omits a substantial part of the project, can then the employer take that extension of time back? And Lee correctly said, no, he can't. I think maybe Ronnie's question was, maybe could be interpreted a different way, is that if there are no extension of time warranted or awarded, and the employer omits a substantial part of the works, can the employer ask for the job to be done in a shorter time than the original contract? And I think I'm correct in saying no, he can't, but I'm not terribly sure. There is some case law on this. I mean, take it to a ridiculous extreme, and the employer omits 75% of the works. Is he entitled to have it done in 25% of the time? I think they probably could be by negotiation, but I think legally, and this, I think, we need to verify this, that the contractor's still got the original contract period to play with. Have you got any thoughts on looking at the question from that point of view, Lee?
From that point of view, there could be an instance where your works will finish earlier, and then I would think it would be a negotiation with the client. If, for instance, let's take a shopping mall. You're doing the structure and all the fit out of the shopping mall, and the client decides to take all the fit out away from you. Your structure is going to finish earlier into that original contract period, which means you wouldn't need the original contract period.
Yeah,
I think there would be an argument now. You'd want to get out earlier and get away. So, but yeah, the whole, I've never seen it happen.
I think it's a matter of negotiation rather than a matter of the employer being entitled to do that, though.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Right. If I'll nip on to the questions that I've got. The first one being from Ken Stewart. Is a clause 15.1 notice to correct the initial submission of a program in terms of clause 8.3 of fidic PDB? Not quite sure what PDB is, but fidic, valid after notice has been given of force majeure under clause 19.2. Question 1. Is the employer entitled to terminate under clause 15.2 if the contractor has not complied? And I take that to mean not complied with a notice to correct the program. Ken, I think we're getting a little bit mixed up here, and I'll try to explain my interpretation of fidic. First of all, clause 15.1 is notice to correct, and the engineer is entitled to give such a notice if the contractor fails to carry out any obligation. So this could be a design obligation, it could be complying with the employer's requirements or the specification, or constructing in accordance with the contract, which again would be the employer's requirements under a design and build or the specification under a red book. Now, 18.3 specifically deals with the contractor's program, and this allows the engineer to give notice if the program submitted by the contractor doesn't comply with the contract. Now, 8.3 specifically deals with the engineer's rights with regard to the program. So, in my view, clause 15.1, notice to correct, is not really an applicable vehicle to use if the engineer doesn't agree with the contractor's program. He should stick to his rights under clause 8.3 because that's specific to the program. If we then go on to 19.2, which is a notice of force majeure. So we're giving notice to the employer, the engineer, that an event of force majeure, possibly COVID, has occurred. But I see that's irrelevant to the matter of the program. the program's either compliant with the contract or it's not compliant with the contract. In that case, the engineer can issue a notice to the contractor. So the existence of force majeure is totally irrelevant to the contractor's initial program. If we go on to the second part of the question, or set question 2, which is the employer entitled to terminate under clause 15.2 if the contract has not complied? Now, 15.2 deals with termination by the employer and includes a list of reasons why the employer may terminate. And one of these reasons is if the contractor does not comply with the clause 15.1 notice to correct. And as I've already said, the notice to correct could be issued for all sorts of reasons, but I don't think it's applicable to the contractor's program. At the end of the day, the contractor's his program is best estimate of the sequence and timing of the activities to complete the project. So again, I don't think it's really inapplicable if the engineer says that he's thinking that, well, it's not a very good program, it's not logic linked, it's not allowed enough time for this or that or the other. So my opinion on this one, and I'm quite willing to admit that other people might have equally good opinions, is that 15.1 is not really applicable to the 8.3 program. So no, the employer is not entitled to terminate. If you look at entitlement to terminate under force majeure, you will see there are provisions within fidic that allow either the contractor or the employer to terminate for, what's the expression, excessive period or prolonged prevention caused by force majeure. So I suspect we're talking about COVID, so that may well be applicable. And in actual fact, the ICCP has done a paper on the parties' entitlement to suspend or terminate because of the effects of COVID. So if you remember, that might be worth looking at. If you're not a member, it might be worth you joining so you can actually find resources and information like that. Okay, so Ken, I hope that's answered your question. If not, you can drop a question or a comment to Nina and I'll try to deal with it. The next question is from Alpha Lavallee, who is actually an ICCP member. And the question is, we signed a contract on the 23rd of July, so not very long ago, what, 3 weeks ago, but today the employer or the engineer is yet to issue the commencement of work subclause 18.1. What are the contractual issues, if any? So let's have a look. Clause 8.1, commencement of works, says that the employer must issue a notice to commence within 42 days of the letter of award. So it's not the signing of the contract that's important here, Alpha. In fact, I've worked on many contracts where we've built the structure, and we're 12 months into the project period, the contract period, before the parties actually get round to signing the contract. Not good practice, I know, but it does happen. But the point is, it's not the signing of the contract, it's the letter of award. So you've got to look at the letter of award. If 42 days has been exceeded, sorry, I keep saying letter of award, it's letter of acceptance under fidic, isn't it? If that 42 days have been exceeded, well, the contractor has got a right, he doesn't have to take it, under clause 16.2, termination by the contractor, which says that the contractor can terminate if the employer substantially fails to perform his obligations. Now, I would say that failing to give notice to proceed within 42 days could be termed as substantially failing, or it could just be he's not got round to it, or he's not ready to hand over the site. I don't know. We've got to look at the details there. So the main point is it's the letter of acceptance that kicks off the 42 days. Yes, then the contractor has a right, if he wants to get out of the contract, but he would need to invoke 6.2 and or justify this, that the failure to give notice to commence is a substantial failure by the employer. I guess it's down to what the contractor wants to do in the situation. So Alpha, I hope that helps. And moving on to another question by Alvin Sindawi. On a contract of the construction of a one-stop border post in Zambia, the currency of payments are split to a 70% US dollars and 30% local currency. The project completion is 1,139 days. It's quite a big project then. And the project is likely to be handed over in less than a month. I'm anticipating this is a month from when Alvin posed the question. Payments have been made on a monthly basis, albeit late, and all have been settled. Very good. Except for the finance charges on the delayed payments. Okay, so this is a situation where the employer's made the payments in accordance with the interim payment certificates, but he's made them late. FIDIC says 14.8 delayed payments is the contractor is entitled to financing charges compounded monthly on the amount unpaid during the period of delay. So this is just a mathematical exercise. It says if you're late by X number of days, you're entitled, or the contractor is entitled to be paid financing charges for that X number of days, compounded monthly at a rate that FIDIC will tell you how to calculate the rate. It may be written into the contract, or it may be based on the bank rate of the country where the project is carried out. Question: what remedy does the contractor have in this case? Well, he has the right to be paid financing charges on the late payment. And then, when the finance charges are settled, is the contractor entitled to payment of compounded charges on the amount unpaid? I'm not quite sure if the question's related to the initial financing charges on the under certificate or the late certification, or the under certification because the employer hasn't paid the financing charges. So my question is, if it's the second, you can't claim financing charges on the non-payment of the financing charges, but under 14.8. But I think the contractor's got an entitled to make a claim under 20.1 because the certificate was not evaluated fairly. FIDIC says you're entitled to financing charges. You've claimed for the financing charges. The engineer has not certified those charges. Therefore, he has not acted fairly in accordance with the contract. So I think the contractor could bring in an additional claim for financing on the non-payment of the financing charges. Having said that, my advice is when you do the maths, you'll find that that's such a small amount. Do you really want as a contractor to go down that route? It's going to be a very, very small amount. It might cost you more to actually put the claim together and more in loss of, what can we say, reputation or loss of employers' relationships if you are going to go to that amount. Now, having said that, if you're on one of these projects where the engineer's not acted fairly, the employer's not acted fairly, you don't really want to work for these people again, maybe you do want to claim for the extra couple of thousand because you've got nothing to lose. And if you're in a negotiation situation at the end of the project, you might as well throw everything at the wall and hope that some of it will stick. So again, Alvin, I hope that helps. If not, please get back in touch and I'll see if I can clarify anything. So that's it, unless Nina has any other questions that have come in live. We do have a few more minutes, and if there are no more questions, I can. There's a couple of things that I would like to talk about if I've got the time, Nina.
Thanks, Andy. No questions in through the chat box yet, so if you do have any, please send them in. And in the meantime, Andy, if you want to chat about the additional things you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, I'm not pointing any fingers here, but we've been doing this clinic for a few months, and I have noticed that a lot of the questions that we are asked, and we're here to answer your questions, to help you and to give advice, but a lot of them are to do with fairly basic knowledge of your construction contract. It could be fidic, NEC, JCT, whatever your construction contract is. Now, this sort of highlights to me something that Arcadis, formerly EC Harris, have been reporting in their world construction dispute reports for several years, and also HKA, who have for the past 2 years produced a similar report where they look at all the projects that they've been involved in, and both these pretty well-renowned international organizations say a high level of disputes within our industry internationally are caused by the parties not complying with their obligations under the contract, or a misunderstanding and lack of understanding of the contract. Now, this tells me that I'm right when I say that in my experience, the average contractor, the average engineer, project manager, architect, the person or company appointed to manage the administration of the contract on behalf of the employer, and many, many employers simply do not understand the contracts that they've entered into. And this comes down to site teams not having a contracts guy that understands the contract on site. It comes down to the engineer not having appointed someone or having somebody on the engineer's team who is conversant with the contract. And it causes problems. So the point I wanted to make is that every project, whichever party that you are working on, needs to have somebody on your behalf that understands the contract inside out, upside down and backwards, and that will save you a lot of money. Contractors, I know you're all saying, oh, somebody like that's expensive. Well, knowledge and expertise doesn't come cheap, but let me ask you, if you don't get the claims that you're entitled to because you've not, for example, submitted your notices when there's a time bar, or you've done a rubbish job putting your claims together, so you've submitted an inadequately expressed claim, or the job ends up in dispute or arbitration where you've got to spend money on lawyers and arbitrators and court fees, isn't that a case of penny wise, pound foolish? Isn't a little bit of money spent on expertise throughout the life of the project from the beginning on somebody who understands the contract well spent when it comes to the risk of losing money or having to spend an awful lot of money, millions possibly, in order to pursue your entitlement because you haven't done it correctly during the life of the project? So that's really my two penneth, my bit of advice based on quite a few years' experience dealing with such matters. So that's it from me, unless Nina has anything else.
No questions have come through, so I think we'll wrap things up there for today. We're just half an hour on the nose, so that's good timing. We'll be back on the 25th of August. These sessions are bi-weekly now, so we'll be back on the 25th. Invitations will go out as usual via email and on our social media pages. So we really hope you can join us again in a couple of weeks. Thanks, Andy. Thanks, Lee. And we'll see you all back in 2 weeks' time. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.